Dan Schneider, the executive director of the American Conservative Union and CPAC organizer, actually denounced the alt-right in his speech that he gave yesterday at CPAC. But there's a little twist in the story here that's pretty face-palmy.
CPAC. We have been slapped in the face. There is a sinister organization that is trying to worm its way into our ranks, and we must not be duped. We must not be deceived. This is serious business. We have heard what conservatism is. We may have to make sure we know what conservatism is not. Just a few years ago, this hate-filled, left-wing fascist group hijacked the very term alt-right. That term alt-right, it has been used for a long time in a very good and normal way. But this group has hijacked it, hijacked the term. And they did it intentionally because they want to deceive the media and they want to deceive you all about what they stand for so they can try to become normalized. And we must not allow them to be normalized. They are not part of us. They stole the term specifically to confuse us. We know who these people are. They met just a couple months ago in Washington, D.C. to spew their hatred and make their Heil Hitler salutes. They are anti-Semites. They are racists. They are sexists. They hate the Constitution. They hate free markets. They hate pluralism. They hate everything and they despise everything we believe in. They are not an extension of conservatism. They are not what Governor Walker and Dr. Arnn and Sabrina Schaefer have talked about. They are nothing but garden variety left-wing fascists.
He's saying the alt-right is left-wing. That is the face-palmiest of all face-palm moments I think I've ever seen. No, it's a get-out-of-jail-free card to say anything and everything that's affiliated with the right is just left if you don't like it. It's the oldest trick in the book, man. The oldest trick in the book. It's not on our side. Not on our side. And by the way, so how can we demonstrate that we do not agree with that and that we are not equal and opposite hypocrites? Here, I'll do it for you right now. Joseph Stalin was an authoritarian leftist, and he led to the deaths of millions of people. There you go. Done. These are the same idiots. It's like Steven Crowder. Steven Crowder argues Hitler was a liberal. Again, I almost have no words for that because it's the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard in my life. So anything and everything that's ever been bad ever, since I'm a child, I can't admit that somebody on, our wing of the spectrum did something bad, so just accuse it is liberal, it is left-wing, by definition, if it's bad. Babies, your children, they're called the alt-right. To be fair, the fact what they call themselves is largely irrelevant. They're actually right-wing because of, the things that they argue for. So you can make the point, and it's a fair point to say, well, actually, most people in the alt-right agree with the left on the Iraq War, for example. That's a fair point because it's true that, from what I've seen, and Richard Spencer, one of the so-called leaders of the alt-right, has made this point repeatedly. A lot of people on the alt-right wanted a conservatism that wasn't like the neocons who want to do nation building everywhere. Okay, so there's one point of connection between liberals and the alt-right. But what else do they stand for? They stand for hating minorities. They're white nationalists. I wonder which side of the political spectrum is more in favor of hating minorities. And another thing they're against, for example, immigration. They hate immigrants, specifically undocumented immigrants, definitely brown-skinned immigrants. If you're Hispanic, they don't like you. If you're a person of color, they don't like you. If you're Jewish, they don't like you. Yeah. I wonder if there's been more of a problem in the Republican Party or the Democratic Party in modern times with those issues. We know the answer to that. And by the way, this is the core of what they are. They say we're a white identity movement, effectively. So how you can take the fact that the Republican Party has run the Southern strategy from LBJ and on, everything after the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act was signed, the Republicans wholly embraced the Southern strategy, and they admit it. You know what that means? They say, don't worry about the minorities. We want white males from the South. We want the white racist vote. That's who they courted. That's who they catered to. And they've been doing it for decades upon decades upon decades. And now they turn around when there's this monster that they largely created because they're simpatico on the biggest part of the ideology. And they go, oh, no, it's the left wing. Left wing. These are the alt-right is left wing. Just own it. Just be a fucking adult. I just told you. You want the left to own something? Right now, I'm owning it. Stalin was an authoritarian left-winger. That's what he was. Now, I'd argue the operative, thing in his actions was the authoritarianism, but nobody can say he was in favor of free markets. He fucking wasn't. So there, we owned it because we're adults. Your turn. Own fucking Hitler, because he's right-wing, motherfucker. There's no doubt about that. Own the alt-right. Own it. Own it. Here, I'll be an adult. I'll be an adult even further. The assholes who rioted because Milo Yiannopoulos was going to give a goofy speech. They're Antifa, by the way, a word I haven't read much until recently, or I don't even know how they pronounce it. Antifa, it's short for anti-fascist, obviously. And they were doing violence. Those are authoritarian left-wingers on our side, and I don't agree with them. In fact, I despise them. They're on the left of the political spectrum. So why don't we, if we can admit it, and we can be adults, and we can be reasonable, and look at things objectively, why is it that anytime anything negative happens that's associated with your end of the spectrum, you guys say, no, they're left-wing! Anything that's bad is left-wing. These people try to argue that MLK is a right-winger who would be voting for Republicans today. Stop and think about that. Please stop and think about that. They say he was a Republican. That is so massively misleading because since then, there's been a political realignment. So again, as a direct result of the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act, all the people who were Dixiecrats, the racist Southern Democrats, fled to the Republican Party. So you're telling me that MLK would vote for the same people who were against him getting his rights in the first place? The idea that Mitt Romney, that MLK would vote for Mitt Romney. These are arguments that they made, man. I remember them. We covered them on the show. He wouldn't vote for Obama. He would vote for Mitt Romney. He would support Republicans. He would be a right-winger today. Look at all the shit. He said, my government is the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today. Talking about Vietnam. Does that sound like something a right-winger would say? My government is the terrorist. Yeah, I hear that all the time from Sean Hannity. My ass, man. He said inequality in healthcare is the worst form of inequality. He was killed when he was protesting with unions for a living wage. That's when he was murdered. But again, when you can't beat them, join them. So that's effectively the inverse of what we're seeing here. You have Dan Schneider saying, everybody agrees that the alt-right sucks and that they're basically neo-Nazis. That nothing to do with the right wing. Nothing to do with the right wing. It's like when people say the Islamic State, nothing to do with Islam. Absolutely nothing to do with it. Look, I'm not saying they represent all of Islam. Obviously they don't. Just like alt-right doesn't represent all conservatives. But it has something to do with it. They're taking a literalist Salafi interpretation, an ultra-Orthodox, right-wing, conservative, fundamentalist interpretation of Islam. You can't say it has nothing to do with Islam. That's just not true. You can't say the alt-right has nothing to do with right-wing ideology. It's just not true. Now, again, with the MLK example, it's the opposite. So they try to do anything that's negative, they say it is by definition left-wing. Anything that's positive, now they can't beat MLK, so they got to join him. So they say, that is, now he's right-wing. Just be fucking adults and own it. Own it. Own it. You built that. You built it. So accept it. Now, again, I'm not saying all conservatives are alt-right. All right-wingers are alt-right. That's simply not the case. That's not true. There's many who are reasonable. There are libertarian-leaning Republicans, for example, who actually are disgusted by the stuff the alt-right stands for. But in the same way that there are some violent communists and Stalin was an authoritarian leftist, in the same way that that's the case, yes, you own it. You own the right-wing aspect of the alt-right, and now to try to use your get-out-of-jail-free card, you're saying, this has got nothing to do with they're left-wingers. They're left, because anything bad ever is left-wing. AIDS is left-wing. HIV is left-wing. Cancer is left-wing. Anything you can think of that's negative is left-wing, and that's the end of the conversation because I'm a child.